Hello, and welcome to Bedtime Stories. My name is Frank Padour, and I'll be reading to you a Grimm Brothers fairy tale entitled The Brave Little Tailor. One fine summer morning, a little tailor sat at his open window on a table at work, and many good things could he buy with the money he earned, for he was a clever little tailor. A farmer's wife came down the street, crying, "Good jam for sale! Good jam for sale!" The voice had a lively sound to the ears of the little tailor, so he put his soft head out the window and cried, "Come here, my good woman. This is the place to sell your goods." The woman ascended the 3 steps with her heavy basket and stood before the tailor, who asked her to uncover it and show him how much she had. As soon as he saw the contents, he rose from his table, and putting down his nose to smell, he exclaimed, "This jam smells so good that I must have 4 ounces. That is 1/4 of a pound. I cannot afford more." The woman, who had hoped to sell a large quantity, gave him what he wished for, but went away quite angry and discontented. "Oh, how I shall enjoy this!" cried the tailor, who cared nothing for the woman's grumbling. "It will give me strength and energy for my work." Then he fetched the bread from his cupboard, cut off a piece the whole size of the loaf, and spread the jam upon it. "That will not taste bitter," he said, "but before I take even a bite, I must finish this waistcoat." Then he placed the bread on a chair near, and, seating himself, sewed and stitched away with a spirit full of joy. In the meantime, the smell of the jam rose to the wall, where numbers of flies were clustered together. So tempting was it, that they flew down in swarms just to taste. "Hello, who invited you?" cried the tailor as he drove away the unbidden guests. But it was of no use. The flies did not understand German. They would not be sent away, but return again in larger companies than ever. Then ran the little tailor, head over heels, as people say, and pulling from the chimney corner a piece of cloth, he said, "Wait and see what I will give you." Then he dashed the cloth unmercifully against them. Presently he stopped to see the havoc he had made, and counted no fewer than 7 lying with their legs stretched out, quite dead. "Am I such a churl," he exclaimed, "that I must admire my own bravery alone? No, no, the whole town shall hear about it." And the little tailor, in great haste, cut out a waist belt, on which he sewed and stitched large letters forming these words, "7 at 1 stroke." "This town," said he again, "indeed, the whole world shall hear of it." And his heart waggled with pride like a lamb's tail. The little tailor bound a girdle round his waist, and determined to go out into the world, for he considered his workshop too small for a display of such bravery. Before starting, he searched in every corner of the house to discover if there was anything he could take with him, but found nothing but an old cheese, which he stuck in his pocket. As he passed out, he saw before the door a bird caught in the bushes. This he also placed in his pocket with the cheese. Then he set out on his journey, tripping lightly along his legs, for he was so light and pliant that he could walk a long way without feeling fatigue. The road he took led him up a high mountain. When he reached the summit, there, quite at his ease, sat an enormous giant who looked at him in a friendly manner. The brave little tailor went straight up to him and said, "Good morning, comrade. Upon my word, you have a grand prospect of the world stretched out before you. As for me, I am traveling in search of adventures. Will you go with me?" The giant looked quite disdainfully at the little tailor and exclaimed, "You conceited little imp! What, go with a contemptible little morsel of a man like you?" "Stop!" cried the tailor, "not so fast!" And unbuttoning his coat, he pointed to the words on his girdle. "If you can read, that will show you whether I am a man or not." The giant read, "7 at 1 stroke," and thinking it must be 7 men who the tailor had killed, he began to feel more respect for him. "Well, now, I will prove you," said the giant. "Look here, can you do this?" And he took up a large stone and squeezed it till the water came from it. "Oh, that is nothing," exclaimed the tailor. "It is but play to me. And, taking out the soft cheese from his pocket, he squeezed it till the whey ran from it, crying out at the same time, "Beat that if you can." The giant knew not what to say. The strength of the little tailor quite astonished him. However, he took up another stone and threw it to such a height in the air that it was impossible to see where it went. "Certainly, that is clever," said the tailor, "but the stone will fall somewhere. I will throw up one that shall not come down again." He put his hand in his pocket and, drawing out the bird, threw it up into the air. Overjoyed at regaining its freedom, the bird rose immediately and, spreading its wings, was soon far out of sight. "What do you think of that performance, comrade?" he asked. "You can throw very well, certainly," replied the giant, "but I should like to see if you can draw a heavy weight as easy as you can throw." He led the little tailor to a forest in which lay an enormous oak which had fallen to the ground. "Now then," he said, "if you are as strong as you say, just help me to carry this tree out of the forest." "Most willingly," replied the little man. "You take the trunk on your shoulders and leave me the leaves and the boughs. They are the heaviest." The giant lifted the trunk on his shoulders, but the cunning little tailor seated himself among the branches, unseen by the giant, who had therefore to carry the whole tree, and the tailor into the bargain, without knowing it. Our little friend was so merry as he went along that he could not help whistling and singing. 3 tailors rode from the door away as if carrying trees was mere child's play. The giant, however, had not gone far when he began to stagger under his heavy load. "I cannot move a step further," he cried. "Don't you hear? I shall let the tree fall." At this, the tailor sprung lightly down, seized the tree with both hands, and exclaimed, "Well, you can't be so very strong not to be able to carry such a tree as this." They left the tree and walked on together till they came to a cherry tree loaded with ripe fruit. The giant seized the topmost branch and, bending it down, placed it in the tailor's hand and told him to eat as much as he'd like. But the little man had not strength enough to hold the branch, so up it sprang again, carrying the little tailor high into the air and letting him fall on the other side, but without hurting him at all. "What?" said the giant. "Had you not strength enough to hold such a twig as this?" "My strength did not fail me," he replied. "Do you suppose a man who could kill 7 at one stroke would find this a difficult task? I sprung over the tree because I saw a number of hunters shooting in a wood close by. Now, you do the same. I should so like to see you spring over." The giant made an attempt, but he could not clear the tree. He only entangled himself in the branches, so that in this, also, the tailor gained the upper hand. Then the giant said to him, "As you are such a clever little fellow, you had better come home with me to my cave and stay the night." The tailor was quite ready to accompany him, and when they reached the cavern, there sat 2 other giants before a blazing fire, each with a large roast sheep in his hands, eating his supper. The little tailor seated himself and thought, "Well, this is a sight worth coming into the world to see." The giant then showed him a bed in which he could sleep, but when he laid himself down, it was so large that he got up again and creeped into a corner, curled himself round, and went to sleep. At midnight, the giant, thinking his visitor was fast asleep, rose up and, taking a heavy iron bar, struck a blow at the bed, which broke it right through. "Ah," thought he, "I must have killed the little grasshopper and got rid of his cunning tricks now." But the next morning, when the giants went out into the wood and were not thinking of the tailor, he walked up to them as brave as ever, and looking as fresh and merry as a bird. The giants were so alarmed at the sight of him to come to life again, as they thought, and remembered that he could kill 7 at one stroke. They quite expected that he would be the death of them all, so taken to their heels, they ran away quickly, and were soon out of sight. Then the little man journeyed on, always following his nose, as the saying is, till, after wandering a long time, he arrived at the entrance court of a king's palace. Feeling very tired, he lay down on the grass and soon fell fast asleep. While he lay there, The passing people read on his girdle, 7 at 1 stroke. "Ah," exclaimed one, "what can a great warrior like this want here in time of peace? He must be a great hero." So they went and told the king and suggested to him that in case a war should break out, it would be a great advantage to secure the services of such a wonderful and clever man at any price. The king listened to his counsel and sent out of the gentlemen of the court to tell the little man, as soon as he awoke, that he wished to enlist him in his service. The messenger remained by him and waited till he at last opened his eyes and stretched his limbs. Then he delivered his message. "Ah, yes," exclaimed the little man, "that is exactly what I came for. I wish to be enlisted in the king's service." Then was he received at the palace with high honors, and handsome apartments prepared for his use. But the military men at the court were jealous of the little tailor, and wished him thousands of miles away. "What will become of us," they said to one another, "if we should quarrel with him, or attempt to fight him? If he can kill 7 at 1 blow, there will soon be an end of us all." So they formed a resolution and went together to the king and re-signed their commissions, saying they could not associate with a man who could kill 7 at 1 blow. The king was very much vexed when he heard this determination, for he did not like the idea of losing all his old and tried servants on account of this stranger, and began to wish he never seen the tailor. But how to get rid of him he knew not, for he might kill them all and place himself on the throne. The king reflected long and deeply on the subject, till at last a plan suggested itself. So he sent for the tailor and told him that, as he was such a great hero, he wished to make a proposal to him. "In the forest, not far from here," he said, "2 giants dwell, who have committed so many dreadful deeds of robbery, murder, and violence, that no one will venture near where they live, for fear of losing their lives. Now, to whosoever shall vanquish and destroy these dreadful giants, I will give my only daughter in marriage, and the half of my kingdom as her dowry. And if you will undertake to do this, I will send an escort of 100 knights with you to assist you in any way you wish." "Well," thought the tailor, "that is a reward worth trying for, especially for such a man as I. It is an offer not met with every day." So he replied to the king, "Yes, sire, I will overcome the giants, but the 100 knights will be of no use to me. I, who have slain 7 at 1 blow, am not likely to be afraid of 2. Then the tailor boldly set out on his enterprise, the 100 knights following him. But when they reached the borders of the wood, he told them to remain there till he returned, as he would rather go alone to attack the giants. They stayed behind gladly, while the bold little tailor rushed into the forest and looked cautiously around. After a while, he saw the 2 giants lying fast asleep under a tree, and snoring so loudly that the leaves above them were shaken from the branches and fell to the ground. The little tailor was not idle. He ran quickly and filled both his pockets full of large stones. Then he climbed up into the tree, and sliding out to the end of the branch under which the sleepers lay, let fall upon the chest of one of the giants one stone after another. It was a long time before even this could disturb him, but at last he woke, and pushing his companion roughly exclaimed, "What do you mean by knocking me about like this?" "You are dreaming," said the other. "I never touched you." And presently they were both asleep again. Then the little tailor threw a heavy stone on the other giant, who woke up in a rage and cried, "You are striking me now. What do you mean by it?" "I never struck you," he growled. They were both so ill-tempered at being disturbed that they quarreled till they were tired, and then lay down to sleep again. As soon as their eyes were closed, the tailor began again at his game, and choosing the largest stone he could find, threw it with all his strength on the chest of the first giant. "This is really too bad," cried he, springing up in a fury and striking his comrade against the tree so violently that it trembled. The other returned him as good as he gave, and a regular combat followed. So furiously did they fight that they uprooted the trees near them to use as weapons. The earth shook under their feet, and the conflict only ended when they both lay dead on the ground. Down sprang the little tailor, exclaiming, "It is a lucky thing for me that they did not uproot the tree in which I sat, or I should have had to spring like a squirrel from one tree to another. However, it is all right now." Then he drew his sword, and after cutting the throats of the giants, went out of the forest and returned to the knights who were waiting for him. "The deed is done," he said. "I have made an end of them both. It was no easy task, I can tell you, for in their struggles for life they rooted up trees for weapons. But all this was useless against one who has killed 7 at one stroke." "And are you not hurt or wounded?" asked one of the soldiers. "Not a very likely thing," he replied. "No, not a hair of my head has been even ruffled." The soldiers would not believe him till he led them into the wood, where they found the giants weltering in their blood and the trees they had uprooted lying near them. The little tailor returned to the court and presented himself before the king to claim the promised reward. But the king, having regretted, promised, and all his anxiety now was to get rid of the little hero. "Ere I can give you my daughter and half my kingdom," said the king, "you must perform one more heroic deed. There is another dangerous creature in my forests, a fierce unicorn, who spreads destruction wherever he is found. You must kill him also." "One unicorn will be nothing after 2 giants," he replied. 7 at one blow, that is my business." So he started off again into the forest, taking with him a rope and an axe, and again asked those who accompanied him to remain outside. He had not long to wait. The unicorn very quickly made his appearance, and as soon as he saw the tailor, sprang forward to pin him to the ground with his horn. "Softly, softly," he cried. "You cannot manage me so easily as that." Then he stood quite still and waited for the animal to come nearer, and on seeing him prepare to make a final spring, the tailor jumped lightly behind the trunk of the tree, at which the unicorn ran all his force and stuck his horn so fast in the trunk that he had not strength enough to pull it out, and therefore remained a prisoner. "I have just caught my bird," said the bold little man. And coming forth from behind the tree, he first fastened the rope round the neck of the unicorn, and with an axe cut the horn out of the tree, and led the animal into the presence of the king. But the king, even now, would not grant the promised reward without requiring the little hero to perform another feat of valor. He made a bargain that before the marriage with his daughter took place, he should kill a wild boar who did great mischief in the forest, and that the king's hunters should assist him. "Oh, certainly," replied the tailor. "That will be child's play for me." So we set out immediately for the forest, but left the hunters outside to their great delight, for the wild boar had often hunted them, and they had no wish to join in the tailor's enterprise. As soon as the wild boar caught sight of the tailor, he flew at him, with glaring tusks and a foaming mouth, and would have thrown him on the ground. But our clever little friend was too quick for him. He sprang through the open window of a little chapel that stood near, and out through another on the other side. The boar was soon after him, but the moment he entered the chapel through the door, the tailor ran round quickly to close it, and the wild animal found himself a prisoner, for he was much too heavy and excited to jump through the window. The little hero called the hunters and showed them the prisoner with their own eyes. After this, he presented the wild boar to the king, who this time, whether he would or no, was obliged to keep his promise to give to the hero his daughter and half his kingdom. Had he known that the little tailor stood before him instead of the great hero he imagined him to be, it would have grieved the king to the heart. So the wedding was performed with great pomp, but very little rejoicing, and thus was a tailor made into a king. Some little time after, the young queen heard her husband talking in his sleep and saying, "Work away, youngster. I expect you to finish that waistcoat very quickly, for you have the seams of the trousers to sew. If you sit there idling, I will lay the yard measure about your ears." This sort of talk occurred several times, and the young queen discovered by it that her husband was of low birth and only a tailor. When she told her father of her trouble and asked him to send away a husband who was only a tailor, the king tried to comfort her by saying, "This evening, when night comes, leave your chamber door unlocked, and as soon as your husband is fast asleep, my servants shall enter and bind him, hand and foot, and carry him away to a ship in which he shall sail to distant lands." The young wife was overjoyed at hearing of this scheme, and readily consented to the arrangement. But the king's equerry had overheard the conversation, and as he had a regard for this young man, he discovered to him the whole of the plot. "I'll soon settle that," was the little tailor's reply. "There shall be a bolt to the door they don't expect." When night came, everyone retired to rest at the usual hour, and as soon as the queen thought her husband slept, she rose quietly and opened the door. But the tailor, who had only pretended to sleep, exclaimed in a loud voice, "Be quick, youngster, and finish the waistcoat, and stitch the seams of these trousers, or you will soon have the yard measure about your ears. I have killed 7 at a blow. I have destroyed 2 giants. I have hunted a unicorn, and taken a wild boar captive. And shall I be afraid of those who stand outside my chamber door?" As soon as the conspirators heard this, they were in a great fright, and fled as if a wild host were at their heels. And from that time, no one in the kingdom could be prevailed upon to take part against him, and so the tailor remained a king for the rest of his life. That was a Grimm Brothers fairy tale entitled The Brave Little Tailor. Thank you for listening. Good night and sweet dreams.